Xi Jinping tells China's army to focus on preparation. So he had earlier warned of dangerous storms on the horizon in the Communist Party Congress that has concluded recently, and so on. And you can see the Chinese president and his the top leadership all wearing military uniforms, which is quite unusual. So what does this mean? Why is Xi Jinping telling the Chinese army, the so-called People's Liberation Army, to focus on war preparation? So Mr. Xi Jinping is he is reasonably young, reasonably young. He's 69 years old. Yeah, so he's not very old. So one could expect him to possibly last the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years, possibly, if he is able to cling on to power. So Mr. Xi Jinping, he currently holds the top three posts in China. He has been reappointed very recently as the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. He is also the head of the Central Military Commission, which is the high command of the PLA, the People's Republic Army, and he's the president of China. Right? So these are the three top positions in the whole of China. And he holds all these three top positions. Now, Xi Jinping is a very ambitious person. He came to power in 2014. Yes, 2014 was it? 2012. Sorry, 2012. And he has inculcated the idea of a Chinese dream, what he calls a Chinese dream, in the Chinese people. The idea of the Chinese dream is of restored national greatness by mid-century, by the middle of the 21st century. He wants restored national greatness for China. Which, what does it mean? It means that China should replace and displace the US as the world's only superpower. That is the great ambition of Xi Jinping, right? So that is the kind of man he is. He has consolidated his power over the Chinese Communist Party, over China. He has been elected for a third term, which is unprecedented, not precedented, precedented. Yeah. Uh, and there is, from the perspective of the People's Liberation Army, the Chinese armed forces, they have a centennial goal. So the PLA was founded in 1927. So in 2027, it's going to become 100 years old. The organization, the army, the PLA. So the centennial goal of the PLA is to make the PLA a world-class armed force by 2027. What does that mean? It means they should establish or accomplish parity with the US military. That's just 5 years away. Will they be able to establish parity with the US military, with the US armed forces in just 5 years? Seems to be unlikely, but they already have a larger navy than the United States Navy. So yeah, things are interesting from that perspective. Okay? So Xi Jinping is asking his armed forces, is asking the PLA to focus on war preparation. He is saying there are storms on the horizon, the dangerous storms on the horizon for China. Now, what storms is he referring to? So, as a nation that is an aspiring superpower, as a nation that has a stated objective of replacing the US as the sole superpower by the middle of the century, the number one competitor, rival, adversary, whatever you want to call it, is going to be the US. So the dangerous storm that Xi Jinping is referring to could possibly refer to a potential possible future conflict with the US. Now, how would that's one possibility. That how would that spark off? That could spark off that sort of conflict could be sparked off by a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. We all know they have made no secret of this, that they wish to reunify Taiwan with the mainland, and they have said that we refuse to rule out the option of using military force for reunifying Taiwan with China. So, in case the Chinese try to invade Taiwan and reunify the nation, the island by force, that would lead to a straightforward conflict with Taiwan and with the US possibly. Yep. If the US does not intervene and try to bail Taiwan out, that would signal to the entire world that the US is no longer capable of countering China and is no longer essentially a superpower. That would be a tremendous, crushing loss to the US prestige. Yeah, it would mean that it would essentially mean the end of US hegemony. So if Taiwan if the Chinese target Taiwan, that could mean a war with the US. And the Chinese will not do this unless they are entirely 100% sure that they will succeed. So, one of the possibilities of the focus of this war preparation could be about a potential future conflict in Taiwan in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, possibly. Yeah, that's one. The second major flashpoint the Chinese have is obviously with India. Let's go to the map because, as we know, the Chinese have refused to demarcate the India-China, the India-Tibet border, and they have been refusing to do this for a very very long time. They want to keep this situation simmering. They want to keep the situation simmering, and they have been employing their good old tried and tested salami slicing tactics, creeping normalcy. Take 1 inch at a time, take 1 foot at a time, intrude here, intrude there, make all these incursions, keep India on the back foot, and try to take small bite-sized pieces of territory out of Indian hands. That's what they've been doing along the entire border, which is an entirely disputed border. uh, so that is a significant flashpoint, and that is obviously a major candidate for a future war, that the Chinese would get into a future war with India. That is a possibility. Yeah. um, Now I have said that I had, let's say, a few months ago, I had said there is a significant possibility of India and China getting involved in some kind of conflict, maybe a small short sharp war or whatever, before the 2024 elections in India, because the Chinese would like to see a weak coalition government or a weak government come to power in New Delhi in 2024. They would definitely not want to see Mr. Modi re-elected. And one of the ways of ensuring that a re-election of Mr. Modi doesn't happen is by, if they can inflict a defeat, a military defeat on India, which would be seen as a national humiliation of the government and the prime minister. So that would make the possibility or the option of quick, short, sharp war with India very attractive from the Chinese perspective. But now things have changed. BRICS is becoming a big thing, and the Chinese economy is no longer rising or growing the way it was supposed to. The Belt and Road Initiative is like semi dead right now. So the great rise of China is not happening the way they had anticipated. In that scenario, it does not make a lot of sense for them to start a conflict with India, which could also and possibly end up in a humiliation for China. It could boomerang on them. Yeah. So now it looks like the possibility of conflict between India and China is less than it would have been 6 months ago. And yet, one has to be very careful. India has to be constantly alert and constantly on its toes, forever vigilant. So, these are the two possibilities, either Taiwan or India, or maybe it's just a bluff. So when Mr. Xi Jinping says that be prepared for war, make preparations for war, it could indicate a possible future move on Taiwan, a possible future conflict with India. Certainly not with Russia right now, and certainly not with the US right now. The US is still too strong for the Chinese when it comes to the military perspective. So there are these possibilities, but there is always a possibility at any time of something happening along the disputed India Tibet border. So, India, from the perspective of India, India will have to remain extremely vigilant, keep eyes, ears open, keep the satellites 24 by 7 monitoring the situation along the Tibet border, and always be open to the possibility that the Chinese would be up to some mischief. It may be a bluff, but it could be a real thing. So, India has to be forever vigilant as long as China occupies Tibet and as long as Pakistan exists.